You can label many people as crazy, but it's hard to fully understand the mentality and the strength of some professional athletes and their mentality enough to call them crazy men.
He's legit crazy.
He'd have to take it. Well, that's what when I was training for that MMA fight against a comedian, I trained with Bisping twice. And I grappled with Bisping, and Bisping's not even known for his jiu-jitsu.
Of course he is.
He's got good jiu-jitsu. He's a brown belt. I know. But primarily, he's known as a striker. The strange thing, because I'd never in my life, because obviously an MMA fighter can beat you up. A professional mixed martial artist can beat you up. But I don't think people realize how badly and how big of the gap it is. Because it's not, but they don't know, Joe. People have no fucking clue until you do it.
When worst comes to worst, when push comes to shove, the crazy man finds a way to drive himself forward. When I've seen push come to shove, I've noticed many people drop out at signs of major adversity and of possibilities of not succeeding. Term it however you want: will, mental resilience, drive. The truth is, these things are learnt through pushing through adversity, experienced through adversity, and not crumbling when worst comes to worst. The crazy man will always have a will, an idea to drive them forward, move them forward, and traveling the steep road upwards, sometimes crashing and burning along the way, but still continuing on a journey that could almost seem impossible for some people.
Decision, Jose Aldo Jr.
Ideals that they have, the will that they put forward, are usually unparalleled in majority of circumstances, but also can always be a detriment. This will can attribute to some people's downfall as well. But these people will always have a lasting impression on people. What they bring and what they display into the world will always be understood as something almost inhuman to other people, with some people struggling to even understand why they would put themselves through such torment just for an ideal or a goal.
So your motivation is obviously excellent. So there's no way it could just be to prove someone wrong as hard as you work.
No, but that's how I got to the mentality and the work ethic I got. Because in high school, I wasn't like this. I sucked in high school. I lost.
What way?
I didn't win a match till I was a sophomore in high school.
Really?
I've been wrestling since third grade. Like, I was ass-tastic and I was horrible. Like,
why?
I got beat one time. The coach left me. They loaded the bus and left me sitting there.
Because you got beat the way you got beat?
Yes.
They didn't want to bring you home?
It wasn't. I got beat the way I got beat. I lost to a girl, Joe. I was that boy. Like, they got the little boy that cried wolf. I was always trying to get out of workouts. I was fat. I was lazy. At the time growing up, I loved the outdoors, but I loved video games. I loved eating junk. I didn't always have this mindset. So when it came to the point when I wanted to do good, and I was trying, I took my very first injury, sophomore year in high school before conference. I snapped my ankle clean through. And I remember everybody, when I was sitting there hurt. First time I was actually hurt, but I had faked so many injuries. Even the coach came up and was like, telling me, get up, Corey, I was faking. Hey, I did it because my brother did it.
Right.
And I want to do everything he did, but I didn't have the drive he had. But after that, seeing the way everybody kind of like dogged me out, I remember coming back from recovery from that. And the first time I ran after that injury, and even in my mind, like, I can't run. They said I can't run yet. And I did, and I was limping, and I was scared it was going to break again. But I made it to where I was going. I was like, bro, I can do this. It's all here now. That's my real, everything is mentality. Like, I never had any problem. I was just lazy. I didn't want to work, so I was finding a way out. And after that, the next year, you can ask the coach. They told my parents I got moved to the varsity tournament, the first or second match, and I took second and third in the varsity tournament after wrestling JV4 the year before. And I lost to the guy that won the thing. The difference between Corey now is night and day. It's because I realized if I put my mind to it and just work, quit working.
Now, I guarantee getting up and continue going on is something very few people have, but it's only something you'll gain by doing such a thing. It's to completely go away with the ideals about giving up or giving in. Do I always think these ideals are healthy? Not in all circumstances, but when shit hits the fan, it certainly does help. Enter Tony Ferguson. Now, to be mentally resilient is one thing, but to be Tony Ferguson is another.
What time is it then? Please tell these guys.
It's Tony time!
Even by fighter standards, Tony Ferguson is considered crazy. Not just by attitude, but by mentality as well.
And I was about to check, and then we banged shin to shin, like the middle of the shin to the middle of his shin. Mm-hmm. And I remember thinking to myself, why the fuck would you do that? Now we're both hurting. Like, I seriously hated that feeling. But he did, like, there was no reaction on his face. There was nothing. He was just like, still on, just on to the next thing. And I feel like I'm glad I fought him then, because like, look at him now. He's like psychotic, you know?
Now, from 2012 to 2019, Tony Ferguson, after his loss against Michael Johnson, would bounce back with a 12-fight win streak over 7 whole years, and winning against many household names such as Gleison Tibau, Rafael dos Anjos, and Edson Barboza, as well as Kevin Lee and Anthony Pettis as his most significant career wins. Donald Cerrone might also be of mention, but it's hard to say when his decline started, which did happen quite close to when he lost to Tony Ferguson. So that's a bit up in the air, because peak Donald Cerrone was definitely a force to be reckoned with, but his current state is far from optimal. Now, it's hard to fully discuss what happened through that 7-year span and the 12-fight win streak, and how much difficulty actually occurred during that period of time. Now, from promoting issues, being in conflict with Conor McGregor, the biggest star at the time, it caused a lot of foul play and him losing the interim title, allegedly. He was also scheduled to fight Khabib until he tore his fibular collateral ligament. Injuries like this take a long time to repair and fully get ready. So to get back into full fitness shape, you know, get your cardio back up, get your strength back up, it's extremely hard. And the recovery itself is a physical burden on the body. So to say this is a long process is an understatement. And what did Tony Ferguson do?
You're telling me 6 months to a year? I'm going to do it in 3 months. I did it in less than 5 months, ladies and gentlemen. Why? Because I was good health, good rest. It took me 4 months because I've had great trainers. Trainers meaning doctors, okay? Doctors, therapists that have helped me battle back from my arm. Dude, I've had how many surgeries, guys? Who knows the right amount of surgeries I've had? None of y'all. I've had 5 to 6 surgeries. I can't even remember how many surgeries I've had. But that's plenty of time to learn a thing or two about a thing or two, don't you think?
He came back in half the time he was supposed to. Not to mention your cardio wouldn't be up to scratch, but your strength wouldn't be there as it was before. I think people underestimate that time left out when he had this injury to the time where he started fighting again. Just this fact would actually be a detriment to him, and the fact that he recovered so quickly still doesn't display that he probably still is feeling the effects of such an injury when fighting. Now, though I mentioned it briefly, this is inhuman levels of resilience and inhuman levels of recovery. The shit is not easy, but to do it like he did feels like a miracle. Mentally, people will not understand what 4 months can actually be. 4 months can actually mean to a person, but it's probably weighing on every fighter's minds when they're injured. So, to not just get up, but leap up out of injury to fight world-class opponents at that is insane.
Long year for me. You guys have no idea the stuff that I went through. I think you guys have seen a little bit, but tonight I went in there and I did it lyrically. So you guys saw me in there fighting my heart out. Good.
It's sad for Tony because every time him and Khabib were scheduled, somebody fell out. Tony's like, next man up. Next man up. And as we have seen on a number of occasions, that next man up type of attitude eventually catches up to you.
I think his technique and his rhythm and his cadence is off. It's unusual. It's unusual timing. His movements are unorthodox. He makes a lot of mistakes, but his belief in himself carries him through a lot of tough situations.
The basics are the things that are going to allow you to compete older. Well, we always watch Tony be unorthodox, right? We never really saw that many of the basics on display.
Also, not getting into sparring for over a year and then going into the Gaethje fight, especially in training, stuff like that, I don't think that would have helped him, especially being out of the cage for a year or so. Now, this is where I feel a lot of Tony's flaws and his unique style has really caught up to him personally. The injury, I do feel, actually did a lot more damage than people actually realize, and it did affect his movement if you just observe. He's also gotten slower as he's aged on, just that tiny bit slower, but enough to make a very large difference. And what I saw in the Gaethje fight personally was a huge amount of damage that probably altered his career. If it was a bit younger, I could have seen him winning that, just because just that hint of speed, just that tiny bit, can probably bolster you through a lot of bad scenarios. So it would have been a more competitive fight. I don't know if he would have won, but it's fair to say the Gaethje fight did a lot of damage. And the decline comes into a factor of all these things. I think all these things together really negatively affected his overall performance. And I very much agree with some of the basics stay with you. If you look at Jose Aldo in his latter career, he's actually doing pretty well for himself, unlike Conor and Tony currently, who are both on a decline. So what I would like to see is Tony win his next fight, hopefully bring some faith back into his career. It's definitely possible. I can definitely see it happening, but I don't want to see him go through the damage either. So I've got mixed feelings about it. But all I can say is I respect the grit, the attitude.
With only Tony's best interests at heart.
He's tough as hell though, man. He was in that heel hook and his ankle definitely popped. I mean, his ankle the rest of the fight looked like a golf ball and maybe even a baseball. And he kept fighting. There's no quitting that dude.
Things like that, they're designed to cause excruciating pain where you have no choice but to tap. You know, the fact that he didn't, I mean, that just says so much about what a warrior this man is. That's why people love Tony Ferguson, and that's how tough he is.
Most athletes would tap, but Tony Ferguson, hey, champions don't lose their heart. They don't lose their desire to fight. They just lose the ability to do the things that made them so great in the past. And I think right now, that's what we're seeing with El Cucuy.
No, the biggest problem that I saw with the Gaethje fight for Tony is that he couldn't close the distance. He was outside of Gaethje's range, and striking on the outside definitely wasn't working for him. And I just think Gaethje's a bit more skilled in that area, but where Tony usually shined was when he was really in close, you know, which he couldn't do because he was stuck on the outside because he couldn't get in as well. Aside from all this, Tony Ferguson is crazy. Not tapping to things that would make people normally tap, almost breaking your foot, you know. It's crazy. He's a crazy man. But that currently ends a saga of Tony Ferguson, and hopefully it's not the final end of his saga. I truly still want it to be Tony time again. Now the next person on the list is Dan the Hangman Hooker.
I just so happen to be standing across from a ranked opponent without a fight. So if you'll do me the honor next, we could get Sean to match it up.
I've been waiting for somebody to actually have some guts to stand here in front of me and say that they wanted to fight me. So if Sean Shelby talks to me tonight and tells me he wants me to fight you, you're a tough opponent. I think you deserve somebody higher ranked.
A person who's been in one of the worst wars in UFC history. Actually, two of them. When you watch Dan Hooker fight, or you notice how he goes about taking up fights, you can notice an extreme lack of self-preservation. Now, it was a bit of hyperbole when I said he's been in one of the worst wars. There's definitely worse ones out of there, but it still doesn't undermine the fact that his fight against Dustin Poirier would have taken a toll on Dan Hooker's body. What do I mean by a lack of self-preservation? Usually when you get in wars, you rethink your whole fight career, you maybe stop, or you have difficulty. You don't just jump right back into having another war with another person. Seems a bit far-fetched, but that's kind of what Dan Hooker has done.
I demand to be on that card. Any of you lightweights want to man up and meet me here? Let's go.
Dan Antonio, your winner! What's next for you in the lightweight division?
I want to rank the opponent.
And continues to do. but I think he is or has going to run into the same problem Tony Ferguson had, which is the next man up attitude is going to take its toll on your body, and mentally it's not going to be healthy for you to get into the right mindset of winning. But I mean, you can't say you don't enjoy some of the silly clips that Dan Hooker kind of put out there.
Hey everyone, just back at the hotel with the lads. Everything's all good. Just a couple stitches on the eye.
Yep, Dan, just a couple of stitches, no brain damage at all. Everything's fine. I mean, he has little to no self-preservation in almost anything he does, and he always goes out headhunting pretty much, which is both very enjoyable as a fight fan, but also very detrimental to what you want to do in your fight career, or just general accomplishments.
It's a funny one because I just went double or nothing, baby. I want to get back. I want to get back to where I was. You know what I mean? And that's the. I don't know. You can sit back and it's like the funny thing about it, because upon reflection, like I really wasn't in that bad of a spot after the Islam, but the fashion in which that fight ended didn't sit well, and that like really lit a fire under me to get back to the same position I was before that fight. So I was just started digging, you know what I mean? I was like, I'm going to get my way out of this. I'm going to get myself back in the title contention. Let's dig our way out of this. And then after the Arnold Allen fight, I look around and my hole's twice as deep. And I'm thinking, shit, this didn't go how I thought it was going to go. You know what? I might just put the shovel down and
Now, in a more serious note, sometimes your ideals or what you want to do won't necessarily result in the things that you want. So, what I noticed with Dan Hooker's fights is, since he kept going for the next man up, or, you know, he decided to swang and bang, per se, it resulted in losses, right? But the preparation for those fights would be severely lacking. Like, 1 week's not enough to prepare for a fight. 1 week's barely enough to get some muscle memory down on some basic techniques. So, generally, the fights that he's going into, he's not being strategic in the way he wants to go about them. I mean, I don't really have to say much except, you know, just take it from the man himself.
Like, that was, everyone's going to put it down to the weight cut or whatever like that. Obviously... obviously everyone has excuses, but I take full responsibility for that fight. I take full responsibility for like the recent run. Like, I don't try and put that on anywhere else. Like, it only comes down to the manner in which that I fought. That's what it comes down to. It's just one of those things. I got back out there. I got out back, started warming up, looked down at my hands, and I was just like, tonight's one of those nights. Like, we're going out there and we're swinging, you know, like we're swinging big. And obviously that's...
What do you mean? You knew something wasn't quite right, or?
Not quite right. I was just like, I wanted to get out there and it's just one of those things. It's just, I wanted to get out there and get in a fist fight. Like, because there's obviously after it, everyone's like, what kind of game plan was that? you just kind of stormed across the cage and started throwing punches. Like, what was it? Then you use your technique. Then you use like your decades of technique of training. It's like, well, kind of just screw that up in the fire that away and went and got after it. And
is that because of the energy in the place, Dan? Was it because
that ain't the energy?
The crowd,
that's just me. Like that's the energy in me. Like you think fighting, you think you can choose to fight like that. You can't choose to fight like that. And that's the funny thing about it. Like, everyone after it kind of takes a step back from you and they're just like, hey, you know, what were you thinking? What were you thinking? But it's like, man, I've done that exact same thing before. I've left with a 50 grand bonus and everyone patting me on the back. You know what I mean? Like, there have been fights like that in the past where I've just looked down at my hands and gone, it's one of those nights. It's one of those nights. We're getting after it tonight. We're getting in a fist fight tonight. That's the danger in fighting of that style. Like that, I know, you know, I'm fully aware of the danger in fighting like that. that's a coin flip. And I know full well that I'm better than that. I know that if I fight technically and fight this and that, I'm better than that, and I'm could outclass opponents like that, which is like the stupid thing about it, right? Like it was a hindsight's 2020.
Just take the Arnold Allen fight for example. Realistically, I do not think he should have gone down to featherweight. I thought that was the dumbest move ever. If anything, you would want to move up in weight, not down in weight. I mean, getting clipped a few times and then having wars, going up in weight might preserve your chin a bit longer, or, you know, stuff like that. Or maybe just being more strategic in fights. In majority of cases, personally, I've noticed that moving down in weight's always a horrible decision. I mean, look at Cody Garbrandt. His chin was already questionable, but going down to flyweight, I think it was non-existent. I mean, you could see that he was threatened by some basic punches, right? Not huge hits. And then he gets flatlined by an overhand. Now, as much as we fantasize the short notice fights in the fight game and how respectable those people are, people don't understand the fact that things like short notice fights actually have. So first of all, you have to weight cut, and some people are willing to accept that, you know, it's not going to be a perfect weight cut. That's just one example. But weight cutting takes a huge toll on your body, and as an athlete myself, I can give you an example of in-season versus out-of-season times. Now, as a fighter, a person who is fighting is going to take even more of a toll due to the nature of fighting. I'll give you direct statistical examples. So, in season, I can perform 100% per se, and I don't have any perfect performances as of late, but out of season, I lose about 14% of my performance. To give you an idea, I would be a world record holder if my in-season time had a 14% decrease by a significant margin, not a minor one. I would have, and this is also in a mid-distance race as well. So if I had that improvement, I would be a world record holder. That's how significant some of these things actually are. So personally, when I see a short notice fight, I don't always regard it as the most or best way to perceive how skilled one's fight game actually is, because your cardio is not up to scratch. You won't be able to react to things you normally be able to. Generally, it's not a good performance metric, but of course, people take those short notice fights.
Dan the Hangman Hooker.
There's a saying, I never make the same mistake twice. I make it 5 times just to be sure. I just like to fight as soon as possible. You give me 6 weeks, that's a holiday. I'm gonna have a half a week off for a holiday.
In reality, these fighters put their bodies through a lot and can do serious harm to themselves. This is kind of why I'm more in the line of proper fight preparation for some of the fighters, and why I don't think short notice fights are actually that great of a thing. Though it can bolster your career, get you an opportunity that you might not always have or might not otherwise have, chances are things aren't going to go well for you unless you get that knockout. When you watch an aftermath of a fight, you realize how much damage a fight can actually do and how scary some of the results can actually be. If you see a more direct example, it really puts things into a better perspective.
Man, you up for an interview? No interview, guys. Come on, let's get him to the doctor.
We're gonna do Dustin real quick. Right this way. You guys. Hooker's gone, guys. Hooker's gone. Hooker's gone. Make way, make way.
Watch your back, please. Watch your back, please.
He did it again. You wild mother crazy mother.
When I hear Dustin Poirier speak, it sounds responsible. He picked up on a lot of issues within the fight and said he was going to change them, which is for the better. He did take a lot of damage, he did take a lot of shots, but that's not something Dan Hooker does, or should I say has done in the past.
You know, fighting is a roller coaster. I think people who say it's not are lying. Every time it's the same feelings. I'm scared, I'm nervous, I don't want to lose. Like, obviously I'm happy I won. I think I could have done a lot of things in that fight. A little bit sharper, crisper, maybe self-preserved a little bit, and not taking as much shots. You know, it took me a while to get into a good rhythm. I think the last 2 rounds I really started feeling a good rhythm, but I'm just grateful, man. I'm thankful, I'm grateful.
But as such, Poirier being responsible, Dan is a bit more irresponsible in the method he chooses to fight.
It was a tough one, man. You know, Dan came to fight. He's a tough guy. He's on the rise. He really thought that he was going to get past me. He talked a lot of trash, like he was going to move forward and fight the champ. But I'm the champ, man.
The next fighter that's going to be covered is Charles Oliveira. Just like his fight career, his life has not necessarily been a steady road up to the top. In Brazil, where poverty and inequality is at an extreme, where people average everyday lives can't get proper access to healthcare and live in crowded favelas. Now, to give context to his rise, his past needs to be addressed, as the rise is all the more impressive as you understand where Charles Oliveira came from. Now, Brazil has one of the highest crime indexes and has also the 4th highest homicide rates in the world in 2018. And Charles did not grow up with the high income elements of Brazil. He lived in the favelas for the majority of his life, and so did his family, working hard to provide for him. Much of Charles's hard work had been facilitated by his family, so he could live a proper lifestyle and grow up healthy. These things cannot be undermined, as we would not have the Charles we have today as champion without the support of his family,